The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is Maia, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another show. Today we talk with Mark Tark. Did I say Tark? We talk with Mark Maia. Sometimes I get an autopilot. Sometimes the reel comes off the spool. And if you're old enough to remember cassette tapes, you got to take the old end of the pencil and you got to wind her back. Today I talk with Mark Maia, who is the creator of an indie comic book, So-Called Living, which is a really fun little book. He managed to send me along a sample. I got to read the first issue before I chatted with him. It was a blast. You know, it's funny because going into Halloween, I always try to think of something Halloweeny, something, an episode that might be Halloween-ish. Obviously, it's nice if it's closer to the date, but, I thought, hey, this is a book about zombies, mostly about vampires, about all kinds of supernatural stuff. It really fits in that pocket of Halloween. So, in a way, this is kind of our Halloween episode. I guess if we need to define it, if we need to have one, then this is it. You got it. It's Halloween, which I'm a big fan of, as I mentioned in the previous episode. Got invited to a couple Halloween parties. Looking forward to that. And, getting spooky. Watching movies. Watching a lot of horror movies. I'm trying to watch them. I watched the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein last night, which is a ton of fun. It's a blast. I do have a soft spot for the Abbott and Costello movies. Maybe it's because as a kid I used to watch them at my grandparents' a lot, which is always a joy. And, I got the box set of a bunch of their movies. I got a box set of the Universal Horror Movie Monsters on Blu-ray. And I dug out that one and watched it last night. It's actually a really fun movie. It's kind of like the pre-Avengers joining of all these Universal monsters in one film. You get the Wolfman working with Lou and Bud. You got, Bela Lugosi back as Dracula. You got Glenn Strange back as the Creature. He was kind of the more famous one to take over after Boris Karloff did it, if only for a couple movies. And it's a great, fun little movie. I've also managed to watch The Substance, which is a cool new horror movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. And managed to pick up a couple other horror movie watches. I watched The Relic, a little 90s sort of monster creature feature with some cool design work. And I feel like there's one more. Oh, In a Violent Nature, which is that new kind of almost like a Friday the 13th movie from the point of view of Jason. All good watches. All recommend. All really, really good. The Substance particularly is fantastic. I highly suggest that film. A friend described it as a very Andre movie, and if you've listened to this show and you've picked up my tastes in movies, you may realize that is in fact true. Very true. So, I don't want to tell you much. Delves into a little bit of body horror. It's got some great commentary about how we treat beautiful people, how tying your self-worth to your appearance. Demi Moore does a fantastic job in it. I can't stress how good this movie is enough, but you need to like a certain type of movie to like it. If you like horror movies, if you like body horror movies, if you like movies with stark social commentaries, this is the one for you. So go check out The Substance. And if you want something very interesting, check out In a Violent Nature. Once again, it's from the point of view of the killer. Kind of just watched him plod through the woods. Based on the knowledge of that, I kind of thought it might be boring, but I'm surprised how watchable it was. It was very cool, and it's kind of like a quiet meditation as well on the inherent violence of nature itself, how kind of scary nature can be and how violent it is, just as is, without an undead killer walking around in the woods. But it's a super cool movie, and I really, really dug it. What I also really dug was my conversation with Mark Maia. So, let's get into it. I hope you're getting ready for Halloween. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're excited to listen to this conversation. So here it is, my talk with Mark Maia.
I've seen that The gremlin with the flashing gremlin. I
Oh,
saw him in another one of your videos. I really like him. He's awesome.
yeah. He's pretty great. I don't know. You don't often. Sometimes you get to see the one behind the computer, which is the Spike
That's
one.
awesome. Where'd you
Yeah.
get all these life-sized gremlins?
Well, that one was made from a model kit you can get on the internet, and a friend of mine did special effects and films, painted it. The and I had that one first. The other ones are like they sold them out of like the Diamond catalog. They were like NECA recreations of the puppets used in the one. It's hard to tell. One's a
Nice.
normal one, and one is Stripe. It has the white hair coming at the top.
Oh yeah, I can see. It's like blown out, but yeah, I can see
Yeah,
stripe.
yeah. I wish it was up in like a full spike, but I feel like I'd have to like actually put in all of the hair gel and stuff in order for that to work. So I'm
Get some moose in there.
full-time job. It seems just keeping the mohawk of my gremlin in my office up to date. Yeah. How are you, Mark?
So yeah, I'm good. I'm
Good,
good.
good.
Sorry, I'm just looking at all your stuff. All the multiple Thanoses. Is that multiple Thanoses?
Yeah, it's kind of my Thanos shrine. I don't know
Uh,
what a multiple. I don't know what plural for Thanos would be. Thanai, like octopus, like Thanai. Yeah, there's some Thanoses. There's the new Swamp Thing in front there. Some Rick and Morty stuff. Some cool paintings. I got some of the. I
Nice.
don't know if you can see the Mogwai version of the replica puppet is there.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see it. Yeah, yeah.
There's Gizmo, and there's one of the Mogwai Stripe before he becomes that one.
Nice. I loved Gremlins when I was younger.
Oh, it's still a classic, man.
It's great.
I probably watched that movie. I mean, it'd be up there. I watched two a lot when I was a kid. Gremlins 2 was a big one. You know,
Mhm.
like when you're, I don't know what your childhood was like, but for me, it was like I grew up in like kind of a rural area, didn't really have cable or anything until I was much, much older. So, a lot of the movies I frequently rewatch were ones that like my cousins or somebody taped off TV. And Gremlins 2 was one that we had recorded, and I used to watch it all the time, just constantly.
I
And
we had one of those illegal boxes so you could get
oh,
channels, you're not supposed to. And that's my family had that. So every time Gremlins came on, I'd watch it. I've seen one more than two.
yeah, I
But
was like that with Ghostbusters as well. I think I saw Ghostbusters 2 way more than I saw one because I had that one recorded and not one. And it was kind of surreal watching one for the first time, when I got older. It's like, oh, right, there's a whole other movie that set up this other one that I watch frequently. And all the stuff they reference about the first one, I finally get to see. So
yeah, there's
that's
like
cool.
there's like a lot of key movies for me in the 80s, and that was like Gremlins, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters. There's probably some others I'm forgetting. Like, there's Terminator, but that wasn't like Terminator and Aliens. They were too adult for me. And so at the time, so I was those other three were more my speed.
Yeah.
I loved Michael J. Fox. So like Teen Wolf. Oh my God, I
Yeah.
watched Teen Wolf to death.
That's
He's like my hero.
one that doesn't come up that often. I've actually been trying to watch as many of the horror stuff. Like for Halloween, I'm a big horror guy, so Halloween's like my jam. And I was trying to watch every year. I try to do the watch 30 movie or 31 movies in October, 31 horror movies.
Yeah.
Never ever works out because I'm very busy. But I was thinking about doing a fun one tonight after this, so I that might be a good choice. I was thinking of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is one I've always wanted to watch, so that's up there
Mhm.
too. But yeah, Teen Wolf 2, those are definitely iconic classics. Well, where did you
Teen Wolf 2 was that guy, what's his name from Arrested Development, right?
Jason Bateman?
Yeah, 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 Jason Bateman.
Yeah,
That's right.
I can't remember what the sport he plays in that one is. I don't think it's basketball. I think it's something else, like wrestling or something.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I love how like the 80s formula for making those movies is just like, all right, so we'll just we'll do all the same things, but just change what those things are, So like he'll do a sport, but instead of basketball this time it'll be like wrestling or like football or whatever, right? And like his girlfriend will be, similar but different. His friends will be similar but different. The whole thing will be, it's all very
Formulaic.
Yo, 100%. And that's something that like later in life really sticks in my craw a little bit watching movies. Some reason it was acceptable back then. Maybe it's because the movies came out so quickly. Now we get these sequels that came out 30 years later, and it's just kind of doing the same thing again. It's like, do something different, please. I just watched was a Beetlejuice, and I was like, I liked it okay, but I was like, it's a lot of beats from the first one.
I haven't seen it yet, but I did rewatch the first one because I was planning on going to the theater to watch it, but that has not happened yet because I do have a toddler
Oh,
and that does not always work out.
No,
So,
you can't. The toddler can't be reasoned with. What do you mean?
well, it's like I have a toddler, I have a YouTube channel, I'm writing this comic book, and I have a day job.
Oh yes, of course.
So my life is very busy. So I'm making a special date to go watch Venom on opening night.
Oh God, I don't know.
I
I
don't care for
kind of
that series in general, but
no.
I am a comic book movie fan. So I was like,
Yeah,
every one of them, I was like, maybe this one will be better. Like, I don't like that they made Venom a joke. Like, it was like a comedy act.
yeah,
So I,
yeah. I mean, I think there's a way to tread that line a little bit. Like Spider-Man can have some comment. Like I'm kind of sick of Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man movies. Like this Craven the Hunter one looks like it's going to be terrible. I mean, I did watch Morbius. I was not a fan. I wouldn't say like it's garbage, but it's not good either. It's just
I
like
don't,
it's somehow more insulting to me when it's just like bland in the middle of the road than it is when it's really terrible or really good. Like to me, it's like I want it to be really good, but I'd rather be really bad and not just like bland, like nothing interesting, just formulaic normal stuff across the middle. To me, that's almost more insulting. It's like, come on, at least if you're gonna swing for the fences, make it wild.
I agree. It's one of those movies that are like, I saw it. I don't ever need to see it again. I was like, they could just, if my son, when he gets older, he wants to watch it, I'll watch it with him. But other than that, I'm probably never going to watch Morbius again.
No. It's not, the Criterion Collection is going to put the Morbius
Mhm.
movie may have hit the
Even if
cult
they came
classic
up,
status.
like maybe if they came up with a Morbius 2, and I was like, maybe I'll watch it. Maybe, I don't know. But I don't see them making a sequel. Mind you, they made a sequel to Ghost Rider,
Yes,
which
two of those.
I swore I was like, I went to theater to watch Ghost Rider. I was so disappointed. I was like, this movie's
Mhm.
garbage. And then I went to go see the second one. I was like, the second one, there's no way the second one could be worse because the first one's terrible. And I sat there. I was like, that was worse. That was so much worse.
Yeah, my biggest complaint with the first Ghost Rider movie was it was like there at no point did the stakes feel like he was actually in trouble. Like from the beginning, he just literally, when he becomes Ghost Rider, wipes out every demon he faces, and he has a slightly harder time with Wes Bentley, but not that really. It's mostly him just like showing up and like beating the holy hell out of them, and then sucking up their souls, and then going on to like the next one. It was just like very, I don't know. There's at no point that I feel like Ghost Rider did not have it in the bag, which is kind of important for these sort of narratives, right? You want to feel like your hero could lose
I agree.
somewhat. But so where are you calling from?
London, Ontario right now.
Oh shit, another
Yeah.
Canadian.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Toronto, but I
Oh, I
moved to
won't hold it against you. That's fine.
I moved to London for work, but my family still all lives in Toronto, so I'm there quite a bit.
I was just there like last week, 2 weeks ago. Went up
An
for a
event?
concert and to visit a friend. Yeah, for my friend lives in Alliston, which is like just outside Toronto, um, but I went up for a concert and then just kind of hung out and did some of the sights, saw some things. It was fun. It was a good time. Haven't been there very much, but cool. Yeah, I like Toronto. It's a nice city. It's cool when you're like, because I live in Nova Scotia, so
Mhm.
it's like when you come out to stuff like that, there's always something going on. Like I love where I live. I think it's great. Halifax is a great city if you want to go do most of the things that you can't do. I live in Truro, which is about an hour away. Here you can go to Halifax. It's not that far. But like when Toronto, it's just there's always something. You can just like there's like an Evil Dead musicals coming, which I want to see. There's other concerts coming after the one I just went to that I want to see. It just feels like it's a not like all the cool things always go to Toronto. They rarely come this far east.
Yeah.
Montreal's about as far as they get out this way.
Yep.
So, you're kind of like you're a little shoehorned by it, but when you go out there and if you're into like esoteric shit like I am as a nerd, they have cool video stores that still sell discs that I like to buy, like Blu-rays and stuff, or
Mhm.
record stores and cool comic stores. The Beguiling is a super cool comic store.
Is the
Uh,
beguiling still open? I was
oh
actually
yeah.
talking about that the other day because I
Yeah.
used to be around the corner from Honest Ed's, but Honest Ed's is gone. Is it
Yes. I
still
don't know
this?
if that's where it's still in the same
It's
location, but
like, is
it's
it?
super cool.
It's just off of Bloor Street.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it's yeah.
So
Yeah.
I went there when I was younger, but I remember going in there when I was a kid, and going going there was interesting because it was all like it had a very indie comic feel. You know what I mean?
Still
There was
does.
signs everywhere,
Uh,
and when I was a kid, I was like, all I know is Spider-Man and Super. Like if there's a cartoon or a movie, I know them, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, what is this? So as a kid, I was like, what is this crap? Like that was me, but I was like, I was a child. I didn't know any better,
Of
right?
course,
I
yeah.
was like, I don't know what the hell this is. I was like, the cartoons are like, sorry, the ad, like the art's weird, and it's like these are
You're
these,
going in looking for Spider-Man. There's like, here's the new Harvey Pekar book. You
yeah.
know,
So I
it's
was like, this is bizarre.
what? Here's a Robert Crumb zine. What? Yeah. What is
Yeah,
this? This is
exactly.
Spider-Man's not in this.
So that's the thing. But it's like now look at me doing my own indie comic and
Oh
trying
yeah,
to get
you're
into
right
the
in the
indie
world
scene.
now. That's the pocket.
But yeah,
Well,
yeah, I'm happy to know it's there. I'm happy to know it's
yeah,
there.
it was cool. I went to that. I went to the Silver Snail. I wasn't as impressed with the Silver Snail because that one has like a big. Everyone talks about that place. And I don't want to shit on it. It's a fine comic store, but to me, the Beguiling has much more character and there's a lot more neat stuff. And all like there's always something to look at. A lot of cool indie stuff. Like no matter where you look, there's something that's kind of there for you. And I felt the Snail was kind of more like a traditional, just get the newest comic store.
Mhm.
Maybe that's because of their location. I don't know.
But yeah, it still
But,
is your more of your basic like come here every Wednesday and get the newest Marvel and
yeah,
DC and Image
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, they're definitely more mainstream for
Yeah,
sure.
I have something in Halifax that I go to that's called Strange Adventures. That's about somewhere between the two. You know, they get the new stuff, but they have lots of cool old stuff. It's not a huge store, but they do. It has a lot of character, and they really pack it with some interesting things. So, so the Beguiling really spoke to me, I guess. And plus, that's a great name for a store. I don't know. It's very cool. So were comics always a part of your childhood? You say growing up?
Well, not comic books specifically, but comic characters. Like I always had Spider-Man toys and Spider-Man sweaters and I liked the cartoons and I watched any like the Superman movies and I was into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There was another movie series. So and I loved all that stuff, but I never really read the comics because as a kid, really I wasn't that much into reading. But as I got older, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it out. And I got my parents to buy me a comic book, but the first comic book they bought me, like they didn't know. They're like, pick one. I was like, okay, I don't know what to pick either. I don't know anything about comics. So I picked up this Daredevil book, and it was like him and Typhoid Mary, and it was very deep and dark. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. So I read it, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. I was like, maybe comic books aren't for me. I was having a hard time reading it because it was so wordy and very adult. And I was like, I don't think comic books are for me. So then I put it down. I stopped, and then a comic book store opened like just across the street, pretty much from my block. I just had to like walk across a parking lot and cross the street, and it was there.
Nice.
And I walked in. I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And I started talking to the guy, and I decided maybe I'll get into comics again. And that was when Spider-Man Torment came out.
Oh, good
and
time.
That's like McFarlane illustrated.
We'll talk about dark and heady. I mean, I wouldn't say it was heady, but it was certainly dark.
Yeah, but I was
doom, doom, all the way up.
I think I was 13 by that point.
Okay.
When I read the Daredevil one, I was probably like 9.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference from 9-year-olds or 13-year-olds.
Oh, yeah. So, 13's when that existential dread starts bleeding in. So you're ready for it there, but not at 9.
And I love the art. I was like, this is different.
Yeah.
So Torment really like pulled me in. I haven't read the story since. Like, I don't remember how good it is, but I remember.
Yeah. That's a good question.
It had Callisto and Lizard.
It did. Yeah. That's funny because I haven't gone back and revisit that either. And I probably should because I have fond memories of it as a kid. It was probably mostly because of the art. But I remember being very dark and bloody, which is kind of like outside of what Spider-Man normally was. But I guess at that point, McFarlane had already done the spot, like the Venom and Spider-Man 3.
No, I don't think Venom was
No, that came later. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think that came out in I think it was that series it came out in, right? That Spider-Man series.
It was an Amazing Spider-Man when he first came, but he was doing
I don't think Venom was out yet.
No, maybe not.
No, maybe not. I don't know. That's a tight thing. I don't think he was out yet.
I think he
Well, maybe he was.
I think he was because I think
he was.
I think McFarlane did all the work on Amazing, and then because it was very popular, went to the Spider-Man Spider-Man title.
You're right. It was out because shortly after I got Torment, not too long after Maximum Carnage.
Right. Yeah.
Came out. So right. That's right. Yeah. So Venom would have been out already.
Yeah, that's cool.
The only reason I thought it didn't because I have 2 issues of Amazing 300.
Yes.
So,
I have a couple too, actually. I had a few. People keep giving me like their collections and they're always in them. And I'm like, hey, like this might be worth a few $100s. And then they're like, no, I don't care. Just keep it. I'm like, all right. So I have a few copies of that one in the first appearance of Carnage still hanging around.
Nice. One of the most upsetting conversations I had. This guy, I don't know this guy, but he was a friend of mine, and I think we were playing Magic the Gathering, or we were
Mhm.
chatting about some geeky shit of some sort, like, and we were sitting around the table, and we started talking about comic books, and he's like, "Oh, I just inherited some comic books actually from my granddad," and
Oh, Jesus.
he's like, "But I really don't." He's like, "Comic books really aren't my thing." I was like, "Really?" He's like, I gladly take them off your hands." I didn't even know what they were yet, but I was like, I
Yeah.
was into comics then, big into collecting at that point. So I was like, yeah, I'll take them off your hands. And he's like, no, like I definitely know they're worth something, but I don't give really a shit about them. So, and I was like, what do you got? And then we start talking. He's like, oh, I got first Spider-Man, the first appearance of Spider-Man. He's like, I got that one in there. He's like, he had that one like all like sealed up. And he's just talking about it like, I don't know how to get rid of this thing. What a nuisance. And I was like, I so I hate. He's like, I'm gonna sell that thing as soon as I can, man. He was like, I was like, you bastard.
I got this Action Comics #1. I don't know what it's. I don't
That's
care.
like my holy grail of is first because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. And I
Yeah.
have a life-sized plush Spider-Man right around the corner.
Oh, beautiful. I'm big.
He's as big as I am.
I'm a big Spider-Man fan,
Excellent.
as you can see.
Nice.
But in the always have been. And I actually did hold in my hands Amazing Fantasy number 15 one time
Nice.
because the comic store lent it to a friend for a project he was working on, and he let me. I held it, and that was about as close as I got to it. But it was pretty cool. It's a big part of every nerd, well, every Spider-Man fan's nerddom history.
Yeah.
It's certainly mine for sure.
Because like I've read it. I've had tons of reprints,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I have hardcover reprints. I have black and white reprints, full colored reprints. I have like
yeah,
so many different reprints of that book.
yeah. It's funny because I used to when I was really young. They put out they're like reprinting like I don't know if it was Marvel Tales, but it was like or featuring Spider-Man, but it was something like that where they're reprinting all the original issues. And it might have been when the Spider-Man cartoon came out on Fox. They might have had some kind of a double comic where it was like a new story involving what's going on or an adaptation of one of the episodes and then the original on the back or something like that. But they had
Mhm.
the one, so I remember reading a lot of those old ones. The one I had that I turned to dust pretty much. I read it so much was the one where Doctor Doom like kidnaps him
Mhm.
or tries to kidnap him and inadvertently kidnaps Flash Thompson by accident when he's trying to dress up as Spider-Man to scare him. And that was kind of a fun sort of like it's weird going back to read that really, really old stuff because it's kind of a slog sometimes. I mean, I get what it was, and it's certainly, but to see what comics have become as a narrative form and to go back to something so basic as those old stories. Like I try to read those essentials every once in a while, like the Thor one, and it was like after issue like 16 of him just like going to Odin, like, why can't I tell Jane that I'm Thor? And he's like, you can't. It's like, oh God.
I
like
could I couldn't read Thor.
uh,
I didn't like even the way it was written. It was like they used the script, and then in certain cases for like describing like the like Asgard. Like I didn't like Thor. I like him. The only time I liked Thor was when he went to the old when they created the Ultimate Universe.
uh,
I liked that Thor.
yeah. Who
So
was basically the one we got in the movies,
yeah, it's basically
Yeah.
like he was a drunk. He was sitting on when he got him. He was just like he's like a cool guy, drunk, chilled Norse god. Everything. He was just too mightier than thou in the comic, and I didn't like the way he spoke. And I was like, I
It was kind of like reading Shakespeare a little bit.
yeah, it was. So it didn't
Yeah.
really appeal to me.
He had all these sort of like, gods that meant to represent different things. And there's always like hidden identities. And it's very Shakespearean in that way. And I
Mm,
know Stan Lee, I can't speak for him, but based on things I've read of him, it seems as though he always sort of wasn't happy they never got to be a legitimate write, I guess, and I use
mm,
that term in quotes. But he read a lot of the classics and certainly had a robust vocabulary. So I believe like I think that was his way of sneaking in that Shakespearean
mm.
kind of writing into his work.
I
But
feel
yeah,
like I'm
it's
the opposite with my book.
yeah. I did get to read one. I got the kit, and I was running around to get home in time to do this.
Did you read this one?
Yeah, that's the first one, right?
That's the first one.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad I clicked the right one. So, well, I guess we'll get to that soon enough. But
Sure.
like the horror stuff. Were you reading horror comics? Was that something you picked up as a kid as well? Because obviously
Uh,
the book has a horror bend to it.
Yeah, it's because the book is like a dark comedy. No, I liked horror movies, but I didn't really read horror comics.
Hmm?
But again, as a kid, I didn't when I started, I didn't really understand like different types of comics, different genres, right? I
Okay.
understood characters, so I'd go after the characters I knew.
Yeah.
So I'd read old Superman or X-Men or Batman or Spider-Man, like the main guys, right? I wasn't
Yeah.
into indie and there wasn't a lot of horror stuff in that. So but as I got older, like only recently that I started getting into horror books, and that's because like there was a lot of mainstream stories that I really enjoyed. But like I read through all the Walking Dead,
Mhm.
right? And I read through that before it's crazy popular.
Yeah.
Uh, I should have bought it at the time because I read my buddy's copies. And I was
Yeah.
like, damn, it's not.
I had everyone from 6 to the end in single issues, and
Uh,
I ended up selling them just because I was like, I can get the trades for so much, and I'm not that attached to them. And it was like the height of The Walking Dead. I was like, might as well. I don't feel super attached that I need to hold on to these. So I got the trades and then sold off all the single issues.
I am Robert Kirkman's one of my favorite writers, but then recently I've read Harrow County. I don't know if you ever read that.
Yeah, yes, I did. Yeah.
So there's some that's some well written, messed up horror story.
Yeah, there's some cool ones out there. It's weird. There's not a lot of like ongoing comics that are like horror bends. It's usually like mini series here and there that have some really cool stuff.
Mhm,
Um, but I mean, you like horror Dracula or one of those sort of things. But
mhm.
like, or Tomb of Dracula. But like, yeah, there's some cool stuff. Scott Snyder put out quite a few cool little weird horror books. There's one called Severed that he put out that I
Mm.
highly suggest if you ever get a chance to check that out.
I'll write
It's
that
really
down.
good. And Joe
Severed.
Severed, yeah. And Joe Hill had like an imprint. The guy did Lock and Key.
I
Yeah,
love Lock and Key.
yeah.
I have issue number one. Joe
Oh,
Hill's one of my
excellent.
favorite writers. He's
Me
great.
too. Me
Him and his
too.
dad,
Oh, yes,
Stephen King.
absolutely.
So those two, that's a
I
winning pair.
There's a show on was it on Shudder called like the Horror's Greatest, and it's like each episode's like a different aspect of horror stuff. Horror's greatest like tropes, horror's greatest giant monsters, that kind of thing. So one episode they did Stephen King adaptations, and like Joe Hill is a talking head on it, and he never really says he's my dad. He just talks about it like as a third party, like, oh, Cujo did this or this movie did that, and I'm just like, he's your dad. Like, just tell us he's your dad. I know he is. And he does say that later when he references some thing that he's in.
Well, clearly he
I
wants to make a name for himself. That's why I changed it to Hill.
Yeah, but I actually like his writing. Like, and this is sacrilege, but don't tell anybody except for putting it on a podcast. But I actually like his writing better than his dad's. But I do. But I know. I don't want Stephen King to kill me, but I do really like his stuff. It just Joe Hill's stuff seems a little more streamlined.
Mhm.
Like Stephen King will tell you why someone's pants are important for about 20 pages, and it's like Joe Hill eschews that a little bit, which I
Mhm.
get and I like, but I still do deeply love his dad's work. In fact, I do a little bit of acting, and I've been in right now. I'm in. They're doing an adaptation of The Institute,
Mhm.
and they're filming it here in Halifax. So I'm a background character in that, so I'm around quite a bit, just doing stuff in the background. But one of my first like roles where I got to speak a lot in the movie was an adaptation of his short story Big Driver that they filmed out here from Full Dark No Stars, I think it was. So that was big fan. Yeah, it's cool. Well, I'm glad you kind of got into the horror aspect of it that way. Like there are a lot of the cool comics out there, but it feels like it's a little harder to find the really good ones.
Yeah, that's why for the I can't remember which stories I've read, but I did try some other horror ones. I was like, it's not really doing anything for me. It just feels like gore for gore.
Mhm.
And those are usually the ones that are like the ones I've read were like demon based.
Yeah,
Oh, actually, I did read some mainstream horror early on. Like I read like
Evil Ernie, yeah.
Evil Ernie, Lady Death stuff. Like I read some of that.
Like, are they still making that, or is it like reprints of the old
Lady
90s
Death
stuff?
is definitely still going. I don't know if Evil Ernie's still going.
Wow. Those
I remember
guys
the
always
last.
just seem like characters in the Wizard
Yeah,
magazine to me. Like, I've
I
only
think
ever saw the ads in Wizard, and I don't think I've ever read the comic itself.
I think the last Evil Ernie story I read, it was he killed the world, and then there was only him and like a guy and a girl left, and he was about to, and then they were like, well, if he kill, and there was only zombies left because he did that,
Yeah.
and then I think they talked him out of it, killing them. They were like, "What if you kill us? Then what are you gonna do? You're done." So basically, they talked him into like, "Help us kill all these guys, and you'll have something to do." So he's just like, "Yeah, I'll kill all the zombies now, so I have shit to do." So he was with them killing all the zombies.
Oh, that's fun.
So that's the way they survived. It was convincing him. It was like, if you kill us, it's over. No more fun times.
Yeah. Well, that
So
was like around that they were like, I mean, around that time period is kind of when they started eschewing the comic code and all that sort of stuff, because they certainly weren't adhering to that. But like in mainstream, you weren't getting a ton of it. Like if I recall correctly, as a kid, they had the Darkhold comic, and then there's like Blade and Ghost Rider, whatever. I think it was the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider at the time, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like there wasn't a lot of like interesting horror. Spawn, of course, came around, and that was sort of a big sort of crossover, and that was a lot of that demon stuff, as you mentioned. But yeah, that's cool. Were your did you have an interest in creating them when you were younger, or is that something that came
Creating
later?
horror comics,
Or just comics in general?
well, I did want to create comics, but I thought I'd go into it as in the illustration portion of it because I was always an artist. I've always drew when
Yeah.
I was younger. Like I've had a career as an artist. Like I've been in the video game industry for 25 years,
Oh wow.
and I started as an animator, background painter, a pixel artist. Like those were all that's the first thing I started. Then I went into game design. Then I became an art director.
Oh wow.
So I thought when I was younger I'd do comic book panels. But two things: I'm very slow at sequential art, and sequential art is not my forte. I'm better at like talking through it and getting it set up. Like I can visualize it, but when it comes to telling a story, actually illustrating these panels,
Mhm.
I have trouble seeing the whole page as a whole until I see it as a whole. Then I can be like, oh, then fix this and adjust this, and sometimes I'll have ideas. But basically, long story short, sequential art isn't really my thing. So so-called living, I wrote it a while ago, and the script was on hold until I found the right artist. I didn't want just any artist. I wanted the right artist.
Mhm.
So, and I finally found him. And that was Marco Leone. That's who illustrated the issue that you checked out and all the
Yeah.
others.
It's
So,
super cool. I got some various vibes of like Chew a little bit, like that sort of.
yeah.
And I'm not saying, I don't say that in a way to like diminish his work and say that it's derivative or anything. 'Cause it's certainly not. But just like the vibe of the playfulness with the sort of horrific and the kind of fun cartoonishness with some of the more serious sort of aspects. It's very cool.
I
really
hear
dig
that
it.
a lot. A lot of people say they get Chew vibes.
Yeah, which
So,
is
and I was
good. I
like,
love Chew.
yeah, it's
It's
great.
good.
I
It's
like
very
Chew.
good. Yeah.
I like Chew just fine. And I find the strangest, like I was talking to this woman she's in her 60s. I was talking to her and she's like, "Oh, I love comic books." And then and I was thinking, like, I've never met a woman in her 60s, and she hangs out with like my wife's mom.
Mhm.
So I'm like, my wife's mom is not the kind of person that reads any comic books and anything, right?
Right.
She'll know Superman and Batman because they have movies. But so I'm talking to her. I was like, what comic books could you possibly be talking about? Archie? Like, that's what my brain's thinking.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get more information out of this. And then I was like, oh, did you see my comic book? And she's like, yeah, it kind of reminded me of Chew. And I was like, what? And I was
Awesome.
like, Yuri Chew? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm blown away. So I started digging in deep, and I was like, wow, you actually are into comics. And I was like, it threw me. Like,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
there's people say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but everybody judges books by their cover. That's what covers are for.
Yeah, 100%.
The covers judge the book.
And it's also delightful when you discover that, that there's something beyond that. I'm a graphic designer, so like I think the cover is very important. That's like my business. So, like, you need to, it's all part of it. But I mean, also can be quite deceiving because sometimes you get a kick-ass cover and the book is terrible, or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
The movie poster's great, but the movie's not very great,
Oh, yeah.
But that's all part of marketing.
All the covers that we have for so-called living, I've done like a really rough sketch and I've sent them to Marco. I was like, this is my idea for this cover. This is my idea for this cover. And that was because I always wanted the covers to be a little different.
Yeah.
I didn't and for like this first one, like they're sitting in like a giant pack of chili fries.
Yeah.
Just sitting in there. And I was like, that's what I wanted. And I had to draw that to describe it to Marco. And I was like, this is what I want. I want them just sitting there. And he's not necessarily the type of guy that would do something strange like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, that suits what the story is like the first issue. And I was like, the next issue, I want his head on fire. And I want all these characters like kind of emerging from the
Yeah.
fire. That has a huge part to do with the second book.
Yeah.
So all the covers, I want to take a certain element from it, and then I get these ideas like, oh, this is what I'd like to see. I want to see
Yeah.
something unique and different, and so and that's it. Because I find not like Marco's a great artist, but I find I've worked with artists in the past, and their go-to seems to be the safe pose, the character pose, or like the
Mhm.
cool. And I was like, I want to kind of tell a bit of a story with the cover, and I want to tell a bit of what's inside on the cover, and I want people to be like, well, that's different.
Yeah,
So
the way it used to be,
yes,
like
so
when
that's
the
what I'm
cover
trying to
actually
do.
told you what was going on in the issue, which is, to me, a part of Comic Path. I mean, I did find out, I think, on the show, the reason why it became all these cool posed covers, mostly so they would have additional art to use on like backpacks or blankets or towels, or
Mhm.
like it was all because of that. It was when Marvel was kind of digging their way out of their bankruptcy, and they went really hard into the merchandising. They, like the Ultimate Spider-Man comic covers were always just some other Mark Bagley angle of him jumping between buildings or doing something. It was
Yeah,
never ever.
like they're always great art, but like there's only so many poses of like Spider-Man, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
It's
Bunch of
like
webbing and a
I was like, all right, what does this tell me? Spider-Man's gonna be swinging through the city.
yeah. Well, what do you know? He's swinging again. Look at him go. But no, that's really cool. And so, where did the story come from? I guess like what was your inspiration for it?
The well, when I sat down to write So-Called Living, again, I sat down and wrote this over 12 years ago,
Oh, okay, well,
script. And it took me that long before I got back on it and tidied it up and found an artist. In the beginning, I tried to find an artist, and they kind of fell through. So I was like, maybe this isn't gonna happen. And
mhm.
then my life changed. I quit my day job, and I decided, and I had a toddler. I think I'm gonna do the comic book now. And so I dug it up and I cleaned it up, and I found Marco, and I just pay him outright because the search for partners wasn't working. So I just pay out Marco's like, okay, Marco, here's how it's gonna work. I pay you, you draw the comic. We're not partners, but we'll work together. But that's just it, because everybody wants, it's always nice to have a partner to work with,
Yeah, for sure.
especially a writer artist combo is like, yeah, that's great. Especially early on when you're like, it's expensive to put a comic book together.
Oh yeah,
So if you can get an artist partner to work with you, then like, hey, you're both contributing your own work. And I always also pitched in that I'll pay for the printing, and I'll give you the first like $5,000 the book makes or whatever,
yep,
right? But not this time. I was like, I'm just gonna go outright, go into debt if I have to, go to Kickstarter. But anyways, to answer your question,
yeah,
when I what made me do the stories, I always wanted to write a story that existed kind of in a world where anything could happen, but where I could also, like Marvel and DC, anything can happen in there, right?
yeah,
But that's the playground I wanted to create for myself, but I didn't want superheroes in there. So I wanted monsters like vampires and werewolves and zombies. And I've recently started making t-shirts with the catchphrase, a world where the extraordinary is ordinary. And that was kind of the
oh
idea. I wanted all these creatures to exist with us. So like you could be a werewolf, and I know you're a werewolf, and I'm a vampire, but here we are having a podcast and we're cool about it. This is our environment. We go to
yeah,
Starbucks together. That's how it works. And there's also like non-supernatural people, which I call normies. So how I did this is I established some characters I wanted to be in there. So I established Jack, did a whole background on him, what he would look like, what he would dress like, what's his personality. I did Jill, his girlfriend, Nick and Casper, who are the two big guys in the first issue.
yeah,
And those are the main four ones I did. And then I set up the situation where I was like, okay, I need this person to get turned into a vampire, but I want to establish the world. So I was like, I want them getting a burger at a truck. And so I just drop them in the scenario, and then I write, not knowing what I'm going to write. I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm like, okay, there's a zombie outbreak on TV, but it's in a world where that's common. So how do I introduce that to the people? And how does Jack react? And then how does Jill react to Jack? And and then they meet a vampire, and it's like, okay, what does that vampire say? I know his personality, so what would he say at this point? So I'm always kind of just writing, and I'm kind of writing what I'm seeing.
yeah,
I don't have necessarily a plan. I have some basics. I know he's going to get turned into a vampire.
yeah.
that, and I know, what's going to happen to some of the characters, if they're going to die or not. But
I was gonna say if you created an elaborate backstory for Jill, I have to trust she comes back at some point.
so
Yeah.
I
So
I have plans for Jill's story,
I see. Cool.
and I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But it was so that's I picture it like a sandbox, and I just make these characters, give them personalities, and I throw them in, and I in my brain I'm just like watching, and I'm talking through them, and I'm like, now I'm this character, now I'm this character, now I'm this character,
Yeah.
and I just go through it, and I just let them play. And that's how I write it. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make this world, and I wanted to let it happen, and I wanted the conversation to be snappy, and I wanted them to be sarcastic, and I wanted to have fun with it, but I also didn't want to be overly I didn't want to overly explain everything. You know what I mean? I
Well, it
didn't.
seems more naturalistic when you write for the characters. Like if you create them in your head
Yeah.
and you know what they're going to do, and most people that are involved with writing will tell you that like if you create a strong enough character and you're clear about who they are, then they kind of, I don't want to say use, cliches like they write themselves, but in a way they kind of do
They
if they have a
do.
clear enough voice in your head.
Yeah. And I didn't want to have like an exposition machine. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I dealt with things that
That's
people
what I
know.
liked a lot about the book was that you don't hit over the head with the metaphor. You don't say this is the world where zombies exist with people, or this is the world. You just sort of like it's just there. You see it on the TV and nobody's surprised by it. So you're like, okay, well, this is normal in this world, and all that sort of stuff. The no vampires sign. So obviously the world is aware of them and doesn't want them in, the racist towards them in some areas,
Yeah.
as they use several times as a term. Which I thought was really cool. Like it reminds me of some of these movies, books, other things that I've read over the years, or fictions that I've sort of ingested that do that. And I think it's very interesting because then you have like a really rich, interesting world to draw on. Because then you're like, well, what else is around here? We got vampires, we got zombies.
Yeah.
What else are we going to see? So
And one thing that actually they came up, which I never even considered, because I get so lost in the characters, and to me, it's very, it's not necessarily I'm putting, like, I don't feel like, oh, I got to put myself in the role of this character.
yeah,
I feel like he's an entity, and I see him separate from me in front of me, and he's doing his own thing, and that's who he is, and like that's how my brain like manifests that. So I found it interesting when somebody commented that they commented that I might have been homophobic because I made a comment about vampires being forest fairies. And I
oh
was like, well, two things on that. Two things
yeah,
on that. One, this is a world where actual fairies
yeah,
exist.
exactly,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So,
think it's pretty clear in the
yeah.
story. Yeah,
So it was like it wasn't never meant to be homophobic, but it was meant to be like derogatory to a certain type of vampire done by a vampire character who thinks he's like cool, like Sons of Anarchy type of vampire,
yeah,
and he doesn't care for your Twilight vampires.
yes,
And that's like, and in this world, he establishes that there's two different kinds. We're the cool kinds, they're losers. But that's his personality, right?
yeah,
And then I was thinking about it. I was like, but that's ridiculous to think in general. I was like, even if I made a character that was homophobic, I'm not homophobic. My character's homophobic. Like I could write about murderers. I'm not a murderer.
yeah, yeah,
Like Stephen King writes all kinds of crazy shit. I don't think he's going to eat people or dress up as a clown and torture children. Like never once did I think that was going to happen, right? Like you
yeah.
can write stories about other characters and not be those characters. And if you water down everybody, and everybody can't be the same, like this in my world, I like to think that, yeah, there might be somebody that's homophobic. I don't have anybody in my story that currently is, but there might be. There might be somebody that's racist. There might be somebody that's this. Somebody might be a murderer. It might be just whatever. Because that exists in our world.
Yeah.
It should exist in this world.
You're
There
not
shouldn't be
glorifying
limitations.
it by representing it,
No,
and then maybe even
it's
representing is. Yeah, I get representing is the right term because it's like that. You're right; it's part of life. So there's no reason why it can't fit into a narrative like that. And
yeah.
yeah, it's weird. It's kind of the same thing whenever a comedian makes a joke and people are like, "Well, he's a misogynist because he made a joke like this," and it's like, well, jokes don't necessarily represent the opinion of the person telling them.
I
But
think
you're right about writing. Like it doesn't. You should be able to write about anything and not. I think it was Jason Aaron who said like write, or maybe he quoted someone else who said write like your whole family's dead. Like write like nobody you're not going to be afraid to offend anyone because everyone in your family's dead. Like no one's going to judge you. So and I kind of always stand by that. I'm like it's totally the way you should do it.
what's that comedian's name? The guy that always wears a suit, Jim Carr, is that his name? Is it
Jimmy
Jim
Carr, yeah, the
Jim Carr?
super dark jokes, yeah.
Yeah. So he had this one skit that I thought was, or this one line I thought was really interesting, and he was saying how he's describing to people, he's like, what I say is jokes. I don't mean it, so you shouldn't be offended by it. And people are like, oh, if you said it, you mean it, blah blah blah. And so he's like, so I come out and I apologize and I say, I'm sorry. And they're like, well, you don't mean it. So he's like, so are you saying that I could say things that I don't mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So
It's like, I'm sorry. And it's like, well, you don't mean it. And it's like, oh, so you're admitting that they can say things they don't mean. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that's I was thinking about that actually when you mentioned that. So that's cool.
But yeah, and if for anybody who hasn't read the book, that line has nothing. There was no homophobia. It was just
No.
It was him referring to like because fairies. You imagine fairies being little weak, tiny little characters, right?
Yes.
He's a big, strong dude, so he's comparing these other vampires to these tiny little fluttery creatures that exist in this world. So,
and I honestly I didn't infer that when I was.
I think most people don't.
No,
I think most people don't. But
there are certain folks that are always looking for a hill, right, to die on or to fight on.
I found that very interesting. I was like, what does that say about you that you're just looking for things that are like everybody's evil? I was like, no, everybody's not evil.
Yeah.
Everybody's not evil.
Well, there are some battles worth fighting, some not, and there's some people that just they're almost defined by I'm a fairly left-leaning person, so I don't want to like shit all over that sort of thing. But there's also some people that are like their whole identity is defined by some crusade that they're on. They don't really have a personality beyond trying to let everyone know how they're outraged by the way things are, and rightfully so, and how they should change. But it's pretty exhausting to live your life always fighting a battle. Like relax every once in a while. Maybe don't make a big fight out of everything.
I agree.
Especially in reference to an actual nymph in the woods in an independent comic book.
I stand in the corner of nothing offends me.
Yeah,
like people say shit, people do terrible things, and that's what can I do about it? It's like I like bitching about it isn't gonna help. All I can do is I try to be a good person. That's the only thing I can do. I can't control anybody else.
No, that's the way to live your life. No, that's cool. No, and I dig the book. I'm excited to see what's coming next.
Yeah, so, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, because the first Kickstarter I did was these two.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all out to the backers already. That was earlier this year, actually. That Kickstarter ran in March. And then now I'm doing a Kickstarter for books 3 and 4, and that's happening right now.
Oh, perfect.
So we've reached our goal in under 6 hours, which was nice.
That's very nice.
And which is good because like I'm an unknown entity in this world and I understand. So I'm trying to, get in front of as many people as possible. And also none of my friends are comic book people. So I'm kind of like in my own section. Like they're supportive. Like my friends all bought the book, all back to the Kickstarter, which is great. But I have a very small group, so them by themselves is not enough to fund. But I'm trying to get involved with other indie people, and when I'm at the cons, I talk to other indie people, and I'm a very talky guy, so I try to learn as much as I can from people, and I'm trying to be as genuine as possible and meet people and understand, and not. I'm trying not to, I don't want to offend anybody. I get everybody's in the same boat and not everybody's doing the same thing. And what I'm trying to do is there's great indie comic books out there. There's also not so great indie comic books out there. So I'm trying to stand out. And when I'm trying to stand out, I'm not comparing myself necessarily to other indies. I try to make a book that looks and feels and reads like something that would compete with Marvel and DC as far as like quality. Right.
Yeah.
And I say that, but that's because there's lots of good quality indie books out there.
Oh yeah,
but
they're the benchmark for
but it's the thing. It's like, how do you find them, right? Because the problem with indie, and I say a problem as in from my perspective, is nobody knows who I am, so nobody's gonna buy the book based because it says Maia on the cover. I love Mark Maia's work. Do that. Nobody knows who the hell I am.
Yeah.
Or I got a bunch of characters that they're not. It's not the X-Men. It's not Spider-Man. So people are. It's not Wolverine. So nobody's going to be like, oh, they're not going to buy it on the character and they're not going to buy it on the writer, at least not yet.
Yes.
So I've got to sell people on like, trust me, this is good. Trust me, a person you don't know, you've never read my stuff. this is good. The art's good. The art is the only thing that you can be like, look,
Yeah.
but are those characters any good? I don't know. So the art reels them in.
Yeah.
And I did try to find art that was very specific to my writing style. So I had an image of like Humberto Ramos,
Yeah. Nice.
right?
Big
And
fan.
yeah, I actually wrote to him. He never responded, but I was like,
Uh,
it's worth a shot. It's
yeah.
worth a shot,
Dear
right?
Humberto, please write my independent
Yeah.
or draw my independent comic.
So I was looking for somebody that was like him because I feel his style matches the tone of the book, the sarcastic kind of like comedy, dark comedy of the book. And that's how I wanted the characters to come across. So I didn't settle for anything else. And I looked everywhere. So I found Marco and I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And books 1 and 2 did well. So I'm happy with and I think books 3 and 4 are actually better than 1 and 2. And it really because book 1 and 2 established the story of like Jack gets turned into a vampire. He's got to learn to adapt to this new way of living in this crazy world where all these monsters exist. And in the beginning, his problems are silly, comical problems. I can't get into my apartment, or I can't walk out into the sun because it's going to set me on fire. That's you deal with that issue too. And like there's those issues he comes across, just the common day things that he should know because it's common. Like I have one panel in book 2 where a little girl comes up to him and she's like, she's like, shouldn't you? I can't remember what the line was, but she's like, you shouldn't be out in the sunlight, you know. And he's like, I know. But he's just got, he's not used to it. It's like, okay, you're a vampire now. And he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he doesn't think about it. He just goes throughout his day and he's like, just shit's happening. I'm just going through my regular day and it's not working out. And he calls his friends for help. They're no help. And then he gets the attention of the mob that you see that in book 2. And the mob are very interested in him for bad reasons. And then book 3 and 4 kind of like it builds on this bigger story. So 1 and 2 are very much establishing Jack and his situation, and book 3 and 4 lays the groundwork for a much bigger story. And you kind of see as far as kooky as Jack is, the mob half, they're very serious. They're not kooky, makey, jokey people. So I always describe it as like, what if the cast of Friends was being hunted down by the Sopranos? So, and they played their roles as they do. Nice. So that's how it is. And currently, like where the story left off, Jack doesn't even know that the mob's after him. So he's just dealing with his life thinking, how could this get any worse when it's definitely going to get worse? You just don't know. Then funny enough, there's this whole, you probably noticed there's one panel only in the first one of a bunny on TV, and it's in the background again. It's like, but in like in other news, the bunny epidemic, and then the TV's turned off, so you don't really hear much about it. But there's this kind of like bunny storyline that's building up in the background, which I like the fact that in this world where monsters are real, the main concern is the bunny situation, but nobody outside of that world knows the bunny situation is. So I'm just kind of teasing it out there. I know what it is, but like I'm teasing it out there, and it's like people are like the bunnies, and but they're not brushing it off like they do like zombies, which they do in the first page.
It's a serious event. Yeah,
it's a serious event because the news treats it as serious, but to our characters, it's a serious event doesn't concern them at the moment. There's a lot of serious events in the world all the time. There's like, floods and tornadoes and hurricanes, but they don't happen where we are. So really, how much do you concern yourself with them? You don't. You go amongst your day like, oh shit, tornado, people, die. That's terrible. But you continue your day. You don't let it weigh on you. And that's what the bunny situation is. It's somebody else's problem. So
is that like a thinly veiled metaphor for like, climate change or some other thing that's like we all just sort of like put in the back burner and it's too big for us to actually contemplate or think about until it's on our doorstep?
Not quite. But it was more of when I was thinking about like the bunnies. It's not something I actually dive into or ever mention anywhere. But
as I contemplate bunnies, as I do.
But it was the idea that the bunnies kind of represent our real, like our fears or representations, like us, the representations of our fragile selves, right? And everybody, like nobody really pays attention to them until like these fragile people or these bunnies kind of like they get together and all of a sudden they're a serious issue. I had this
I
whole
like
write-up
that.
I did.
I
So,
like this.
so that was
It's kind of
kind of
like it's
what
kind
I
of
was
like
going with.
Watership Down with the rabbits like unionized.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, all right, let's get our act together and stop being eaten by everybody and getting destroyed. Let's if we work together, we can be a force. I like that. It's interesting. It's kind
Yeah.
of like it's like unionizing rabbits.
So even if you go to like the Kickstarter page, there's like this bunny trim on the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
There's like just bunnies, 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 and then but they're a background element. They're just bunnies, bunnies, bunnies. And there's one cover that's got bunnies all over it, and that was a cover that I drew, and it was kind of in honor of what is called the Blood Bunny Colony, and that's not an in-story thing. That's a real world thing, which is I make these white keychains and we make them. Not we don't get them made in China. We make them in this house. I created that file. I give it to my wife. She has a laser cutter. She cuts these things, and they're these black and white acrylic bunny keychains. And if you flip them over, they'll say official member of the Blood Bunny Colony. And if you buy that keychain on the Kickstarter, you'll get some sort of discount or an additional prize or something on the following Kickstarter. Now, I don't guarantee what that thing is going to be because it depends what my situation is at that point.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that people who bought the keychain in the first Kickstarter, which I think the number is like 29 people who bought the keychain.
Uh-huh.
So it's 29 members of the Blood Bunny Colony. Those people will all get an option. They'll get two options. They'll either be able to upgrade their tier for free. So that's either if they get a standard, they can upgrade to an elite. If they get an elite, they can upgrade to a sex pot, which I can get into in a bit. So those are the tiers they can upgrade to. They can't upgrade from a sex pot to an all-in. That mathematically doesn't work out.
Of course not.
So
you got to keep your sex pod, mathematics correct here.
But so that's one option. There's a few tier upgrades they can get for free. So if they want the elite covers, which is by guest artists, they can buy the standard and they'll automatically upgrade for no extra cost. Or if they want to keep like the standard issue, they don't want the forced upgrade. I'll send them like a sticker and print set that's not available to buy on the page. I just send it to them, so it's just for them. So they get the choice of what they do. And the keychains are $8 Canadian. So for an American, that's like $5. And considering that we make them ourselves at home, that's actually it's a pretty good deal just for a cute little keychain.
Yes.
It's like they're fair size and they're really good looking little keychains.
Cool.
And so like people love them. We make a few for the show, but the ones we make for when we go to cons, they don't say official member of the Blood Bunny Colony. They say two things. They either say I'll swallow your soul or cute but deadly on the back. And that's to separate the fact that by buying these, you're not a member of the colony. You're just buying a cute little keychain.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah.
That's neat. No, like when you said earlier about sort of trying to market, I've been enough cons. I do art prints that I sell cons. I have done comics in the past. It's been a long time since I've done anything comic wise. But you watch the people around you, you hear them giving the pitch. And most of them just have all they can really pitch to the average person walking by the table. It's the story. And it's cool, man. I think it's fun. I think the people that like these sort of stories are really going to like this. And I think it's going to go well. I really dig it. I'm looking forward to reading more.
Oh, thanks, brother. Yeah, well, you have access to 2 more of the review copies, so feel free to check them out.
I will, absolutely. Are you still involved with the video game industry, or is that when you quit your day job? Yeah?
Yeah, I did quit my day job, was basically working in the office. So I still do contract work as a contract consultant, because I have 25 years experience in the video game industry. Most of that has been as art director or creative director. So that's what I consult on now.
That's very cool.
So, yeah,
Can you, what games have you worked on?
I've worked on probably close to 100 titles.
Oh wow! List everyone in alphabetical order, please. I'm kidding.
It's funny because I was trying to make a list together. I was like, I don't know how many games I worked on, and then I came up with I think I labeled 20 because at one point I needed to put a list together for when I worked in the office, and I was like, I think that's all of them. And then somebody's like, oh, did you write Mage Knight down? It's like, oh no, I didn't. Did you write Atomic Betty down? I was like, oh no, I didn't do that either. And then they're like, here, check this list. Here's the list of all the games the studios put out. And I was like, oh, I've done this and this and this. And there's like another 60 in here that I've done that I've completely forgot about.
Wow.
So I have a terrible memory. But like games I've worked on the Battlefield franchise.
Oh wow.
So that was probably the biggest franchise I've worked on, or biggest title. Like I've worked out with Barbie IP. I did Secret Agent Barbie for the Game Boy Color, which actually reviewed extremely well and did really well in sales.
Awesome.
And there was a review online, and IGN labeled it as the best Metal Gear Solid knockoff on the GBA. But it was funny. It wasn't Metal Gear Solid didn't exist on the GBA at the time. And funny enough, one of the people, like the producers that were involved with EA when they were, he worked for EA at the time. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Somebody who was involved with the Metal Gear Solid people, he came over, he saw Secret Agent Barbie, he played it, he's like, oh, that's a cool idea. And then I don't know, months or a year later or whatever, Metal Gear Solid game comes out on Game Boy Color. And I was like, that's our idea. I was like, you call us a Metal Gear Solid knockoff. I was like, they borrowed our ideas. They took our ideas.
That's hilarious. Well, and they get the benefit of the franchise being there,
Yeah.
right? So they can say that. That's fun.
But it did really well. And there's an interview of the guys who did God of War, and they're like, yeah, when we the designers, like, yeah, when we're looking for ideas, we looked at a lot of things. And it was like, we even looked at like Secret Agent Barbie on the Game Boy Color. And they're like, no, don't laugh. It's a really good game. And I was like, that's awesome. I have that printed somewhere.
That's hilarious.
That's awesome that came out.
That's huge. That's awesome. Well, I'm a bit of a gamer, so I wouldn't say I'm an avid one. Like I'm too busy to really stay on top of all the new things. But I'm currently playing it's a Jedi Survivor, the Star Wars game. So
I just started Cyberpunk today.
Oh, nice. How big did you make your penis? Was it huge or just average size?
I picked a large.
I think every time I ask that question when someone says playing cyber, there's literally always the same answer. Like, oh, as big as possible. It's as big, that's hilarious.
And but it keeps crashing on me every 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh shit. Okay, well, that's not good.
And so I was like, I have my graphics cards updated. That's what triggered. I told you I was like a little late because my Windows was updating. That's what triggered that chain of events. I was like, oh, now Windows is updating, it's taking forever.
Oh, it's all good. No worries.
I was like, get it done.
Awesome.
So that's it. But I don't get much time to play either. I play mostly on my Steam Deck.
Oh yeah, I got to get. A friend of mine showed me his, and I really like it. I got to get.
They're awesome. They're awesome. But I did play that one sitting here for about 30 minutes. And I was like,
nice.
I haven't done this in forever. Because I found myself with like some downtime today, which I never find. And so I was like, this is excellent.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned you have a toddler. This is your first child?
Yeah. So, and he's 3 years old. He just had his third birthday, September 17th.
It's a fun age.
Yeah. So, and it's heartbreaking when like, I go upstairs. He's like, Daddy, you gonna play with me? He's like, oh, Daddy's gotta go work, buddy. I feel so bad.
Cats in the cradle in the silver spoon.
Exactly. So I'm trying to like free up time because I have a YouTube channel that takes up a lot of my time. It's called Board Game Coffee. If anybody's into board games and they're interested, they can check that out.
I was wondering who that was. Someone just followed the
YouTube that was
page. I was like, oh, I just saw that. I was like, oh, that's cool. I just finally got on YouTube with this. I mean, it's only an audio podcast, but I do use some clips for promotional stuff. But it took forever after finally getting a YouTube channel because you have to like have a channel for a while before they let you put a podcast on it. So it was a solid like 8 months or something before they finally let me upload the RSS feed. So, but I'm there now. And I got one more follower. So awesome. Or you got any events coming up or anything, or is it just a Kickstarter?
I'm going to be in Newmarket. There's a Newmarket con. It's like Wayside Games.
Yeah.
They're putting out con. I think it's the first one inside a brewery.
Sweet.
So I think it's a different type of vibe.
Sounds like a blast.
But I was like, I'll try it because I want to try to get as many cons as possible, but at the same time, I don't want to go to like Fan Expo where everybody's going there to get autographs with casts of Star Trek because that's what they're there for, right? So 120,000 people there that aren't looking for indie comics, right? They're looking for a lot of them are younger kids with $20 in their pockets that are looking to buy cute kitty buttons or a cute little print or a cute little this, a cute little that, and there's all this like arts and craftsy, cutie, collecty thingies.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people are there for. But mind you, this year at Fan Expo, I talked to a lot of indie people and they said they were having a really good year. So I was like, that's excellent. But I heard, I don't know how much the tables are, but I think they're like $650 or something.
Yeah,
like, they're
crazy.
Expensive for like 4 days. And I was like, how many books do you have to even make that? So you just make your table, and how much product did you get rid of to make your table? So I was like, I'm looking for smaller cons. I'd rather do like indie focus cons. So when people come there, they're coming for indie, or go somewhere like I went to Shock Stock in London, or London, Ontario is right. I'm living now. So I went to Shock Stock in London, Ontario, and there was only like 2 comic book people there. So there wasn't many. And people came by like, oh, what's this? I was like, oh, it's a dark horror and I described it to them. They're like, awesome. And it did well there. Like the comic book, it didn't cost us much for the table.
Yeah.
And I think we sold like 20 issues a day for our first. I was like, 20 issues a day was pretty good for an unknown entity at the small con. So I was like, hey, that's not bad. Especially since I've heard like some indie cons and they're like, yeah, we sold like 6 copies or 7 copies today. And I was like, well, we're doing 20 today. And I actually went because it was during Free Comic Book Day. And we know this comic book store, and they set us up with a table outside their store for free. And I sold another 20 books there. So one day we sold 40 copies.
Nice.
So I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And the Free Comic Book Day crowd was excellent.
Yeah, that's huge.
I made some like printed coloring pages for the kiddies. I just basically took all the color and the text and I left the bubbles. So I was like, you can make your own comics. So there's an idea. If anybody's looking for like freebies to give away, just take the color off your pages, take the words out of the bubbles, leave the bubbles, and give it to kids and say, make your own story.
That's a great idea.
So they can just color it in and then just write.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
It doesn't cost much. You get a stack of papers. I gave them all away. Like there was enough kids that took them all.
It's good marketing too, right? I mean, a kid might get that and then want to go back and read the actual comic too, right? So
yeah, I wouldn't suggest social living for kids, but we did it. There's one girl, she's showed up to all our shows up with her dad. I don't know. She looks like she's like somewhere between 9-10 years old, and she always dresses in the cutest little costume. Like she was dressed as Ray the first time I saw her. I can't remember who she was dressed as the second time, but she comes up to the table, and she's with her dad, and she's like, "I like this. Can I buy this?" And he's looking, and we stepped in. And we're like, just so you know, there's no nudity, there's no grotesque violence, but like there's a mild decapitation.
Yeah.
But there's
I think mild decapitation is a great name for some kind of book. Just mild. It's a mild decapitation, you know. It's like piano wire. It's not too messy.
I told her that, and it was like there's definitely swearing, right? And I was like, oh, she's okay with that. So we're like, okay. So he bought the 2 books for her, and she came back and she's another show, and she just like loves our table. She wanted to buy stickers. I was like, oh, this is great. We got to we're making this like little 10-year-old fan. It was awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many parents let their kids do whatever. Like I had a little brother with big brothers, big sisters. For about 5 years till he aged out of the program when he turned 19. But and I met him, he was 13, and he's like, the first time we went out, we just had like lunch or whatever, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, yeah, my mom gave me the Big Brothers Big Sisters program tends to try to pair you with kids that are into the same things you are. So they give you a questionnaire and all this. So I'm sitting there and he goes, yeah, so for Christmas, my mom gave me all the Friday the 13th movies, like the box set. And I'm like, you're 13? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I guess I could take you to any movie that's out there. I mean, if your mom gave you that, I mean, it's the door's open. I mean, you can pretty much watch any horror movie from here on out. It's just like all the cursing and nudity and violence is in those. So it's
I was the same thing. My parents never stopped me from.
Yeah, mine didn't really either.
Ever.
I remember going to the library to get out Stephen King books when I was like 10. And the librarian's like, should you be reading these? And I'm like, no, mom lets me. She's like, all right, here's it, enjoy. And I'm like, oh, it's going to take me a while. It's a big book.
And considering like parents are so like wary of what their children play and watch and do. And I was like, I watched everything anything I wanted. There was no limitations. I played whatever video game I wanted. There was no limitations. And my parents didn't even know what I was doing. But I came out as a very responsible child because I basically took care of myself. So I came out, I was very responsible. I go out on to meet my friends so we could go out, hang out, like just walk the streets of Toronto. And they were older than me. Some of them were older than me. And their parents was like, you're only allowed to go if you go with Mark. Because he's responsible. He'll watch me. He's 2 years older than I am.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've never been a firm believer that like violent images or whatever like begets a desire to do violence. I feel like if you're already wired that way, you'll find some other way. I don't think reading the violent comic makes you go out and be violent. I think it's already inside you. And if you didn't pick up that one comic, you would find some other thing that would, a movie, a TV show, something that will speak to that part of you.
And there's everything. It's funny actually, because I was just watching that show on Disney Plus, The English Teacher.
Oh,
and it's fairly new.
Okay.
And the main character on there is the teacher is gay. And early on, I think the first episode, there's an issue where a mom. It's a comedy.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny. But the mom.
Oh, who's in that? That sounds familiar.
I don't know any of the actors.
Oh, okay.
But the one of the moms is freaking out because her son saw the male gay teacher kiss his boyfriend in front of him. So she's like, "You made my son gay." Like that's the whole premise. And he's like, "I did not make your son gay." But I was like, "It's the same theory." It's like if you saw somebody kill and then you go kill somebody, he's like, "You made my son a murderer." I was like, "No, you don't just things don't just go in through your eyeballs and you're just like, I'm what I just saw."
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of messed up things. I am a well-rounded individual.
Yeah. And that
Like
probably makes you a better well-rounded individual.
When the internet first came out, I would look up everything and anything. I was like, what kind of crazy shit can I find on the internet? And back then, my eyeballs I just took in everything. And and there's stuff there I saw then. I was like, I have no interest in seeing that again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've seen some like crazy stuff. And I was like, no interest.
Like you can find anything. You watch beheading videos on the internet. Like it's horrifying.
And I saw it when I was young, when the internet was new. I saw it and I was just saw people getting pulled apart. And I was like, interesting. And I would just see it like, wow, that's I didn't even cringe. I was just looking at it. I was like, that's gross. Oh, that's painful. And then now I'm like, I have no interest in seeing it. If I see anything that's like, oh, that's my alarm. Sorry, that was my alarm because I have to be somewhere at 8.
All right, no problem. Well, I think that caps it up. Violence does not beget violence when it comes to viewing it. But thanks, Mark. I really appreciate having you on the show. This is a blast.
Thanks, man. It was great talking to you.
Yeah. Well, keep me up to date with what's going on with the new stuff. I'll always pimp it on my feeds as well. So,
and for anybody still watching, So-Called Living is live now on Kickstarter.
That's right.
It's if you're looking for like something Halloweeny, it's got monsters. It's a dark comedy. So you should try that. It's the perfect October comic book.
Perfect. I'm thinking about trying to do an episode that was like something horror centric for Halloween, and now I got it. So I'm perfect.
There you go.
I'm done. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Spike it. Okay.
Yeah, bye-bye. There it is, my conversation with Mark Maia. A great chat, a great talk. And I don't know if you may have noticed my voice sounds a little weird. It's because I'm getting over a cold, as I mentioned in the chat. It seems to every year I don't get sick very often, but when I do, it's either really, really bad or just not that bad, enough to be annoying. And that's where I'm at right now. So it's just hovering on that being annoying part, but not quite as bad as being violently ill. It's mostly just a little bit of runny nose, a little bit of a sore throat, and just enough to annoy the hell out of me. So struggling with that. But anyway, be sure to tune in another week's time with another episode. It's going to be a great time. Don't know if that's going to be Halloween themed. We'll see what we can do. But in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read some comics, watch some horror movies, and get ready for Halloween, because it's coming. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.